Hello there, welcome to the introduction of Kingdom Fungi. This is a very diverse and interesting group of organisms, so let's go ahead and explore. So they could be considered hidden networks, and a lot of fungus you can't even see, and it's not because they're microscopic, it's because they're underground. So above ground parts, of course, you typically see, but underground it could span hundreds of hectares, which is hundreds of miles squared. So what these networks allow fungi to do is to exchange nutrients from the soil and for sugars in return with plants often. Some of them can transfer the sugars between different tree species. And here's an example of one of the above ground type of structure. These structures are called fruiting bodies, but this particular group of organisms has a specific name. It belongs to Basidiomycetes, which is one of the phyla, and this is called a basidiocarp. So if we look at fungi as a whole, as I mentioned, they are quite diverse and widespread. They're essential for most ecosystems that are terrestrial because they do live on ground. Some of them do live in the water, but most of them are terrestrial. They can break down organic materials, and they are important in the recycling of vital nutrients from dead organic materials to those that are living. At this point, there are over 100,000 species of fungi that have been studied, but there's estimated to be millions of species of fungi that we just don't really know about. Fungi are heterotrophic, and they feed by absorption. So what they do is they release enzymes into the environment, and these enzymes help break down the components of the environment to allow them to absorb it easier. This is called absorptive heterotrophy. Now, some fungi are considered decomposers in this manner, but some of them are parasitic, and some of them serve as in mutualistic relationships. Fungi include the unicellular yeasts and molds, which are unicellular. Molds are multicellular filamentous type of fungi. As you can see, we've had some quite interesting types of fungi. Some of them are brightly colored. Some of them are they produce these sticky substances. But as you can see, this is Lactarius indigo, and of course it's named according to its color. Now, in terms of morphology of fungi, the multicellular fungi have structures that enhance their ability to absorb nutrients. And what these structures do is allow them to spread out and increase the surface area. So as you can see, we have hyphae, which are the filamentous structures, and the hyphae run all the way up through the spore-producing structures, or the fruiting bodies. But they are what basically spread out in that hidden network that I was telling you about across hundreds of hectares of space and volume of the ground. So a lot of it we can't see, it's underground. Now, hyphae are just like branching filaments, and together the hyphae create what's called the mycelium. And the mycelium is a very large collection of branching hyphae. Now, the hyphae generally have tubular cell walls, and they're made up of chitin. So one of the key characteristics of fungi is that they have chitin in their cell walls. Now, they're not the only type of organism that has chitin in their cell walls. Some animals do, so you cannot characterize fungi as being chitinous only, right? So other organisms do produce chitin. Now, if we look closely at the different types of hyphae, there are two major types. There's septate hyphae and there's cenocytic hyphae. The septate hyphae have septa built into within the filament, and it creates sections or cellular-like structures. So they're cross walls, which separate the hypha into different sections. The cenocytic do not have cross walls. So you can see that the contents of the cenocytic hyphae are not separated by anything, so they can just kind of move around and interact with each other. Now, as I mentioned, the hyphae form a very large interwoven network called the mycelium. And this mycelium, or the structure of the hyphae, and which makes up the mycelium, maximizes the surface area to volume ratio, which makes their ability to exchange nutrients and feed extremely efficient. Some fungi have specialized hyphae. Subspecialized hyphae allow for the feeding on live animals. For instance, you can see here we have the hyphae of a fungus wrapping around. It's basically trapping a nematode, so then it'll feed on the. Some fungi have specialized hyphae called ostoria. Ostoria are present in a mutualistic type of fungus that form what's called arbuscules that are like hand or finger-like projections. The finger-like projections protrude through the cell wall of plants, but they do not pass the plasma membrane of plants. But these finger-like projections allow the increase of surface area to volume ratio, which increases the efficiency of the exchange between the fungus and the plant. These type of fungi are called mycorrhizae. Mycorrhizae are basically mutualistic relationships between a fungus and a plant. There are two types of mycorrhizae. One is called the ectomycorrhizae, and the other one is called the arbuscular mycorrhizae. So I just talked about the arbuscules that are formed from the ostoria, which are specialized hyphae and those types of fungi. But some fungi just kind of wrap around the surface of the root, and their specialized hyphae just intercalate in between the plant cells in the root. They do not form the arbuscules, as you can see on the right. These just kind of, they do not protrude past the cell wall, but they do kind of embed themselves in between the cells of the root. Now let's talk about the significance of fungi and their relationships with other types of organisms. So let's start with fungus-plant mutualisms. Now we already talked about one of them, the mycorrhizae. Let's talk about another one. They're called endophytes. What they are just fungi that live inside the leaves or in other plants in some way. Some of them make toxins that help defend the host plant, so it's a benefit to the host plant. And of course, the fungus will obtain some nutrients from the host plant. Some of the fungi can help the plant tolerate heat, drought, or heavy metals. So it provides some sort of resistance to extreme environment with the fungus present. And then most of the endophytes are going to be belong to the group of fungi called the Ascomycetes. Ascomycetes are basically a very large, diverse group that are involved in fungus-plant mutualisms and other types of mutualisms, as in the lichens. One example of a fungus that produces toxins that happen to be dangerous to humans. So it's ergot on rye. It's actually an Ascomycete that produces toxins, and it's in a mutualistic relationship with rye. And humans eat rye, and in the Middle Ages it caused the death of more than 40,000 people. So ergotism is like a disease, and it's characterized by certain symptoms like gangrene, nervous spasms, hallucinations, insanity. Ergots contain lysergic acid, which happens to be the raw material for LSD, which is kind of probably where the now, let's talk about fungus-animal mutualisms. So, some fungi can share their digestive systems or services with animals. So, some of them help cows break down the grass that they eat, so they can provide their services in the guts of cows. Many species of ants, interestingly, use the digestive power of fungi by raising them in farms to help them feed the whole group of. Some fungi are parasitic, and typically about 30% of them are parasites of plants, so they live in or on the plants, and this has caused loss in 10 to 50% of the world's annual harvest pretty much every year. So these are just a couple examples of parasitic fungi and the diseases in plants that they cause. So corn smut, of course, is going to be on corn, and tar spot fungus on maple leaves. But there are a ton of other fungi that cause problems in plants, and of course can help us lose our food source if they became out of control. Now, some of them serve as parasites of insects. If you already watched the video on the phylogeny and the life cycle of some of them, you'd see that some of them kind of take over animals like insects. And here's an example of one of them. It's called of one of them. You can see that the fungus is kind of growing out of the ant. And if you watch the video, and we'll see one in class, it's Ophiocordyceps unilateralis. Now, there are many other species of fungi that are specific to certain types of insects. So this one actually infects only a certain type of ant, and other ones infect other types of insects. And what they do is just basically take over their nervous system, and it drives them to be like zombie-like is what they're calling it, so that it drives them to go to a location which is beneficial for the growth and reproduction of the fungus. Kind of cool stuff. Now, there's a Chytridiomycota that actually has been implicated in the decline and or extinction of many, hundreds of species of amphibians worldwide. So you can see that a bunch of dead frogs right here, the yellow-legged frogs killed by the bee dendrobatitis infection. Now, mycosis is basically a disease in humans, in animals, really. It's a fungal infection in animals. So mycology is the area of science. Some scientists study all types of diseases and different fungi. Now, a couple examples would be the ringworm and athlete's foot. You might have experienced one or more of these. Now, some of them can be systemic mycoses. So this is a type of disease which causes problems systemically throughout the entire body. And then opportunistic mycoses. So we have some that are yeast infections. So these types of species normally live in our body, but then when their growth becomes out of control, it causes disease and damage to tissue. Now, there are some practical uses of fungi. One of them, of course, we eat food. We make cheeses using fungi. We make alcoholic beverages, and then, of course, making bread. Some fungi produce antibiotics, like penicillin. And genetic research using fungi lead to a lot of information even about humans, because fungi are closely related to animals, as you remember from the phylogeny and the Protists chapter. And they're eukaryotes, so they're a lot easier to study, and they have very similar genes. Gliocladium roseum is a fungus that actually produces hydrocarbons, and these hydrocarbons are very similar to diesel fuel. It could possibly be used as a biofuel. All right, Another one, of course, there are, I guess, recreational uses of some fungi. Psilocybe is one that actually produces chemicals that cause hallucinations, and some people use it recreationally. I do not recommend this, though. All right, so this is a summary of this segment. We have we talked about fungi evolution and fungal structures in general, and then of course relationships that fungi have with other types of organisms, other than that of a lichen, which was discussed in a different segment. So I talked about mutualistic, parasitic, and pathogenic fungi, and then of course some practical uses of fungi. Thank you.